Greetings everyone, my name is Michael McCann and welcome to this Wayward Art Company tutorial on architectural visualization in the Blender game engine. And my purpose for making this is to sort of demonstrate a more practical use for the game engine. Because if we're going to be honest, we can say that the Blender game engine will probably never create the next Fallout or Call of Duty kind of thing. Mostly because where Blender falls short in the game engine is its ability to handle a lot of polygons at once, or large texture sizes as well, before it starts to slow down. But for game concepts, it's perfect, and for more practical reasons like this, like interior design or architectural visualization, it can be pretty amazing. Especially since you don't need to know any computer language or programming, which is basically a necessity in all other game engines. And now that virtual reality is a little more relevant in our time, it kind of pushes the idea a little further of what might be possible for architecture and design when creating environments in a game engine. So whether you're using the game engine for this purpose, or maybe you're just interested in learning game environment creation or level design or something, then let me just quickly outline what's going to be in this series. First, I'll be demonstrating the workflow for creating these environments, from the modeling to texturing in cycles, working with materials, and then baking out all of those textures so that they can be used in the game engine. And then I'll be jumping on the PBR bandwagon because it's such a hot topic right now. We'll basically be going over how to create more realistic materials for the game engine, but I'm going to be a little more thorough than that, and that I'm going to try to recreate as many cycles shaders as I can in GLSL, so that we'll be creating things like glass shaders and velvet shaders, and we'll even be doing a little bit of like translucent and subsurface scattering effects. And then we'll be creating these shaders so that they can be really quickly and easily used in the game engine. And then at the end, we'll be working with logic bricks and all of the other features in the game engine to make our scene interactive. And I'm using the most current version of Blender, which during the time of this recording is 2.78. And the first thing I'm going to do is go to my Properties window and click on the Scene tab. And then under Units, I'm going to select meters as the unit of measurement, which is what most of the world uses. And now I'll tab into Edit Mode and hold Control so that the cube snaps to the grid, and pull it up so that the bottom sits on the grid floor. Now I'll select this little Face tab so that I can edit the faces of the model, and I'll press N to bring up my options to the right, and scroll all the way down until I see Edge Info. And I'll check this little box that says length. And now you can actually see the length along each edge of the model, which will dynamically change as you're editing. So if I grab this top face and move it up, you can see that that's turned to 3 meters. If I drag this side out, and this side as well, now it's 4 meters by 3 meters. And it's a good idea to use reference objects in your scenes that help you gain a little more perspective on the scaling of your environment. So in this case, I'm using a human model from Make Human. And I think I'm going to make this room a little longer than it is wide. So I'll do 2.5 meters on each side, which will be 5 meters in total. Okay, so now it's 4 meters by 5 meters by 3 meters tall. Now I'm going to add a doorway, so I'll use Control R and then scroll up on the mouse wheel to add 2 edge loops. And then down here I want to click on this little Absolute Grid Snapping tab, which will allow me to, if I hold Control, I can drag the edge to the grid even when it's not already perfectly positioned on one of the grid lines. Now I'll use Control R again to add the top of the doorway, and this is really where the Make Human model comes in handy because it kind of helps me to approximate where the top of the doorway should be. And so now I want to extrude these doorways out. So with the face select, I'll select both of those faces, and go to my right orthographic view. And I'm just going to type E to extrude, and then immediately left click. And now Alt S will scale those two doorways along the normals. And now I'll hold Control and select this face and just pull it out so that it snaps to the grid, and that's because we've enabled the absolute grid snapping. And do the other side as well. And now I'm going to extrude these faces out again because we want to create the illusion that more of this home exists than just one single room. So we'll extrude these out on both sides and then up to the same height as that center room. Okay, so I think I'm going to switch and use a matte cap because they're kind of fun to use, and I feel like by making the scene more aesthetically pleasing, it kind of, I don't know, it just sort of helps, I think, with the workflow. So now I'm just extruding these side walls out to match the same width of that center room. And I'm trying to keep this model as simple as possible for the sake of the demonstration. So I have two doorways. I want to add a few windows. So I'm going to use Control R and then scroll up on the mouse wheel until I have 3 loop cuts. And I want to put windows in each one of these sections with the Inset tool. But as you can see, if I just select all of these and use I to inset, it insets everything together. So we need to do this in sections. So if I select these two faces and then these two faces, I can use I to inset and then come over to my Inset Faces options and adjust the thickness. And provided that you do that, when you select the other faces, so these two and then these two, and use I to inset again, it sets it to the exact same size as the first set of windows. But they are a little low, so with Edge Select, I'll just select the bottom edge of those windows and pull them up a bit. And then go back to Face Select and select all of those faces and extrude those out. And then from front orthographic view, I can use Control to snap those windows to the grid. And I want to get rid of those faces, so I'll type X and choose Delete Faces. And so now they're open. And I'll uncheck the length box because we're pretty much done modeling this room now. So we don't really need to know the length of the edges anymore. And in edit mode, I'll select everything with A and come over to my shading UVs tab and flip the direction of those normals because we want the normals to be on the inside. And then over here to the right, I will select backface culling. And this will allow us to see on the inside of the room when we're outside of the model. But all of these edges kind of blend together. So if I come over to my Object tab and click Wire under the display, then now all of those edges have that nice fine black line around them, which helps distinguish where all of those edges are. Okay, so now we're finished with our Make Human model because we don't really need any more references for scale. The next step for our model is doing retopology. And probably when you think of retopology, you think of cleaning up a really messy mesh into something more organized with quads. But when you're modeling for the game engine, you want to do the very opposite. You want to reduce your vertice count by using something that looks a little less clean, something that uses triangles. Okay, so I'll go into right orthographic view. And in wireframe mode, I'll use B to box select the whole middle section. And I'll use H to hide that. And that way it'll be a little easier to do the retopology on these outside pieces first. And the way that I like to think about it is that all meshes have two different types of vertices. So this vertex here, for instance, on the corner, this actually supports like the shape of the model. So where these two edges meet, there's like a 90-degree angle happening. However, this one, it only exists because two edges meet. So if I were to dissolve that vertex, nothing happens to the actual object. However, if I dissolve this one, you can see that it actually removes the top faces. So you want to be careful when you're doing retopology that you're not actually altering the shape of the mesh. So if I select this top edge and these back edges, and the same ones on the other side, I can press G, which is the edge slide tool, and move those over to the side. And the reason I'm not selecting this front edge is because that will in fact change the shape of the mesh. So just the top one and the back ones. And again, the same ones on the other side. And then type GG and slide those over to the edge. And now we can select these edges along the sides and the back. And use the edge slide again to slide those to the top. Okay, so those two pieces look pretty good. One thing I want to do though is select the edges around the doorways and add a seam so that later they're just easier to select and separate if we need to. So I'll use Control E and then mark seam. Okay, and now I'll use Alt H to unhide that middle section. Okay, so I'll deselect it with A. And if I hover over these other pieces, because we added those seams, I can use L to select them and then hide them with H. And now we can just start working on this middle section. So I'll go back to my edge select, and I will select these 4 edges on top, and use GG and slide them to the side. Do the same thing with these. Okay, this entire edge that cuts through the windows can be removed, but you want to make sure not to select this one because that will alter the shape of the door. But all of the others that cut, through the middle of the windows there can be removed. So we'll just slide those up. And we'll select these on the back and slide those up as well. Okay, so here on the bottom we have to be a little careful because we can't select the ones on the end because they'll affect the shape of the door. So we can select these in the middle and slide those out to the side. And let's see. Can slide this out to the side, which has disconnected itself from the edge at the top. I'm not exactly sure why. Maybe we'll select one vertex here and slide it off to the corner and make triangles on the floor. And we'll do the same here for the roof. Just slide them towards the center. And for some reason it left these double vertices there. I'm not really sure, again, how that happened, but just be careful of areas which may have left double vertices. Or come to think of it, we had just slid an edge to the top, which would account for those extra vertices. I wasn't really thinking, but that's why they're there. Anyway, I'm not really sure exactly why the edges disconnected from them. You just want to make sure you check all of the edges for, added vertices. But I think I can slide this entire edge to one side. And that doesn't change the shape of the model. So I think that will work. And I think that we're probably done with the retopology now. I don't really believe that we can get the vertice count down any lower. So if I unhide those other sections with Alt H and I select everything with A, if I look up at my vertice count, I see that I have 150 vertices. So if I type W and then remove doubles, you can see that that's gone down 72 vertices, which is almost half. And if you try to think about, mesh objects in the game engine, if you can imagine that maybe close to half of the vertices don't actually contribute to the actual shape of the object, and they can potentially be removed, then you can fit a lot more into your scene before things start slowing down. Now we're ready to move over to cycles and start working on our lighting. And lighting is probably the most important part of creating any environment or scene. But it's probably also one of the most difficult to really understand and get right. So the first step is to use HDRI lighting to illuminate your scene and give it a very natural feel. So in one of my windows, I'll select the rendered view, and then in the properties, I'll select the world tab and click on use nodes. And then down at the bottom, I'll select the world material, and then I'll select this background node and press Control T. And because I have the Node Wrangler add-on enabled, that automatically adds the texture and coordinates. So now I'm going to use an HDRI that I have. You can find many of them online. They're pretty easy to find for free. And now that we have our natural lighting, we can select our lamp and change it to a sun lamp. And now you want to rotate and position it so that it creates interesting shadows in your scene. This would look a lot better, of course, if we had actual objects in our scene, like furniture and so forth, but we're not using those in this example. So, but right now we do have like the rays of light through the windows, which looks very cool. And the idea here is just to get the composition right. I'm increasing the strength of the sun to about 9. And our scene is looking a little noisy, which brings us to the next lighting tip, which is using portals. Portals direct all of the environment lighting into the area in which you've added a portal. So if I tab into edit mode and I select the entire frame of one of these windows, and type Shift S and choose cursor to selected. That puts the cursor directly in the center of the window. And then type Shift A and add a lamp, area lamp. And so then if I go over to my lamp settings, you see this little box that says portal, so you want to check that. And because our windows are rectangular, we want to change this from square to rectangle. And then you want to rotate the portal along whatever axis your window is facing. So in this case, I want my portal to be pointing towards the positive x-axis. And then I want to adjust the size so that it fits perfectly within the window. So I'll adjust these x and y values so that it's roughly the same dimension as the window. Okay, so now I want to use Shift D to duplicate that portal and move it in front of each window. So we'll move it to the next one and then use Shift D again and move to the third window. And then duplicate it one more time for the last window. And that will really help reduce the noise when we bake our textures later. It'll look a little cleaner with all of that environmental light being directed into our scene. It really helps clean it up a bit. And even though I won't be adding any objects into this scene for this demonstration, you'll probably want man-made lighting in your scene, lamps and such, in which case you would want to use black body values, which is essentially the color temperature of a light. Wikipedia has a lot of information on this, but here is probably the best example. It shows the different colors of different temperatures of light. So if I were to demonstrate this in cycles, I could type Shift A and go to Converter and Black Body. And let's bring up the chart. And I'll do 3 of these examples. I'll do the 1700K for the match flame, the 32 for the studio lamps, and about an 8000 for an LCD screen. So I'll Shift D to duplicate this 3 times. By the way, the K stands for Kelvin, which is the units of measurement for blackbody. So we'll do 1700. This was the match flame. We'll do 3200, which was the studio lighting, or probably a good like approximation for like a good, just like a natural lamp value. So this was the candle flame. This was the LCD screen, which is a little softer and a little more bluish. And then this was the studio lamp, which I like a lot for interior lighting. It's a nice, like natural, artificial man-made lighting. I think that probably is a good standard for most interior lamps. But that's it for the first part of this series. I hope that you guys enjoyed it, and if you did, please share it with other people who you think might enjoy it as well, and I'll see you in the next one.